Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good day, whatever it is, wherever you are. We are so happy to have y'all join us today for another Power to Fly Chat and Learn virtual event. Now, my name is Meg. I am, as always, incredibly excited and honored to get to participate and host y'all today. But before we dive into today's event, we're going to be talking about the power of quiet influence, career growth strategies for introverts. Now, I think if anybody's attended a Power to Fly event before, you know that I am not an introvert. However, I am here on behalf of my fellow extroverts to listen and learn about what introverts might need a little bit more of and how I can support y'all. So thank you for allowing me to enter this sacred space for y'all. But I'm very excited to get going on today's subject. So before we do, I just want to go into real quick. I'm going to give you a brief look at our code of conduct. Now, this looks like a lot of scary legalese, but truly what it boils down to is just don't be a jerk, okay? Operate from a place of kindness and respect, and it's pretty hard to go wrong from there. If you have any further questions on this, you want details, please feel free to DM me. You can find me in the dropdown. I think I'm still listed as Power to Fly Chat and Learn. Sorry, y'all, I didn't change that. But if you have any questions on this, please feel free to message me. I'm the one that wrote it, so I'm happy to explain it to you. But, it's pretty basic, so don't be too afraid. This next screen, we're going to give you a little bit of housekeeping information. This will be especially important if today is your first event with Power to Fly. And if that's the case, then hi, welcome. I'm so happy to meet you. Now, my love is no less real for my frequent flyers, okay? Thank you all so much for joining us for all of these wonderful events. I am always very happy to see your familiar names and faces and avatars in the chat. So thank you all so much. Now, whether this is your first event or your 50th, the big thing we want to stress for all of you is participation. We want to make sure that since you took time to be here out of your day and be here with us live, we want to make sure that we reward you for that. So please feel free to participate. You can do that with your cameras if you'd like, but there is no need to be Instagram perfect, y'all. I think I'm on like day 3 of the dry shampoo combo. But truly, we don't care if you are in a ball gown or a bathrobe. It makes no difference to us. We just want to meet you where you are. Now, if you do want to participate, but you don't want to do so with your camera, that's fine. You don't have to. You can always chime in to the chat if you'd like. In fact, I'm going to encourage y'all to take a move over into that chat if you'd like, and start, letting us know where you're joining us from. I'm always really eager to see how far our global audience spreads. I just realized I didn't call mine out either. So if you want like the full, diagnosis rundown, my name's Meg. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a 38-year-old white woman with pink and blue hair, pink glasses, and a gray sweater on. Now, if you have questions, you want to throw those in the chat, we would love to see them. If you have questions that you want raised, but you want to be kept anonymous, no worries. Just DM your question to me. I am happy to raise your question or comment and keep you anonymous. Oh, y'all, we've got snowy Lansing, Michigan. Thanks, Christy, for joining us. I'm not too far from you. We've got Marco Island, Florida. Lorraine is dialing in from San Francisco. So thank you all so much for joining. Now, the other thing I like to highlight about these events is that we are both live streaming to our YouTube right now. Hi, YouTube. And we're also recording. Now, what that means for all of you is whether you are able to join us today or not, whether you are only able to stay for a couple minutes or the full 60, doesn't matter. Everybody is going to get a link in about 4 to 5 business days. Power to Fly will email you with a link to where you can view this recording when we post it to powertofly.com. Now, like I said, we are live streaming and recording to our YouTube as well. So how that works is if Lorraine says something today so unbelievably mind-blowing that you don't want to wait 4 to 5 business days to tell somebody about it or share this info, you don't have to. You can go to our YouTube channel. The video is usually posted by the end of business today. And from there, you can share the links out. You can browse a section and kind of a selection of some of our favorite chats. So it's a really great place to get some more resources. But even if you are very excited and want to share some YouTube links, that's awesome. But I definitely recommend that you check out our website and our resource center. It's truly the mother lode, y'all. And if you are here at an event with Power to Fly, most likely you also care about our metrics and our mission. We want to see true gender equity, pay equity. We want the workplaces to look like the places we live. So if that is important to you, like it's important to us, I think a lot of the resources on our website will be especially helpful for you. And that's how we think we're going to move the needle towards these goals we want to see in your life. So what I mean to say by all of this is you don't have to take notes. We will have a recording available for y'all to take a look at. We'll remind you that the recording exists in about a week. So no worries about that. But I very much recommend that you take advantage of any and all of these resources. If you have questions on this, please feel free to let us know. Our help desk inbox is hi@powertofly.com. All right, now on to my favorite part of the event. I get to introduce you to the main attraction. Now, Lorraine K. Lee is absolutely fabulous for like 78 million reasons, which will soon be very clear. However, I do want to highlight her Supercharge Your Professional Presence. She's got this amazing career coaching website. I'll let her tell you a little bit more about it in just a moment. But if anything that we're saying today really like kind of piques your interest, I very much recommend that you take a look at that QR code. It's on the screen. I think Lorraine also has one on her video screen as well.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you. So take a look at that link. Check out her page. It's pretty amazing. And I think once you listen to her for more than 4 minutes, you will also be convinced that this is a person you want to spend some more time with. So now, in case you haven't joined us before to see one of Lorraine's chats with us, Lorraine K. Lee is a keynote speaker and author, as well as an award-winning keynote speaker. She was also an instructor for Stanford Continuing Studies, as well as LinkedIn Learning. She's also the author of Unforgettable Presence, Get Seen, Gain Influence, and Catapult Your Career, which is published by Wiley in 2025. Now, she works with Fortune 100 organizations, global teams, and individuals to teach them all how to supercharge their professional presence. She's recognized as a LinkedIn top voice and has more than 300,000 LinkedIn followers, as well as a decade of experience as a founding editor at companies like LinkedIn and Prezi, which is how I got to know Lorraine first through Powerfly. Now, Lorraine has been featured in some amazing publications, including Bloomberg, Forbes, and Entrepreneur. Lorraine, what else would you like our audience members to know about you before we dive into today's questions?
Yes, well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for attending the session today. I was telling Meg earlier, this is my first speaking event of the year, so really excited to kick it off with Power to Fly. I think you pretty much covered it, Meg. I mean, the obvious thing, I'm an introvert, so that would just be the one other thing I would say.
All right, excellent. All right, so we're going to go in and start going over some questions. These were questions that we identified at registration. But like I said, you all are here and you took time out of your day to be here with us live. So we want to make sure that we reward you for that. So please feel free, ask questions. If you want us to dive in deeper on anything, hold on here. There we go. If you want us to dive in deeper on any, any topics that we are, uh, covering, if you want to, more of an explanation on something, whatever it is, please feel free to throw it into that group chat. Or like I said, you can always DM me if you want your questions or comments kept anonymous. All right, Lorraine, let's kind of kick off here. We've got a bunch of ground to cover.
Great.
One of the more kind of bedrock ones, when we're talking about introverts, let's set the level there. When
Mhm.
talking about people who are introverted, what kind of qualities or attitudes are we generally speaking of?
Mhm. Well, introverts, as you all know, being in the audience, introverts versus extroverts. A lot of people, when they think of introverts, they might think of shy or quiet, and those types of people can certainly be introverts. But being an introvert is really being defined as how you get your energy and how you like to spend your time. And so introverts are going to often need more recharge time, some more time alone with themselves. And one or the other is not better or worse. It's just the way that we are, and understanding that is going to be key in knowing how we approach certain workplace situations, how we organize our day, right? If we have like back-to-back meetings, that for sure is going to drain us, and even how we approach things like relationship building at work.
Okay, I like that. All right. So as we're talking about some of these, more common natural tendencies of introverts, is there a way to turn some of these tendencies into, I honestly hate the term superpower when it comes to stuff like this, but is there a way to turn it into a skill or something that can support what you're trying to do in your goals, professionally?
Yeah, so the introverts have so many superpowers, and we have so many strengths in different areas. So there's a few that I really like to highlight. The first is that because introverts are so thoughtful and they're deep thinkers, communication is amazing. Introverts are often really strong writers, and especially in this day and age where people are using tools like AI to maybe shortcut things, or we're very distracted and disconnected. Being a strong communicator, knowing how to write well, is such a critical workplace skill. I feel like it's getting lost, as a taught skill, but it's something that's going to be really important in helping you convey your ideas, advocate for yourself, connect with others when you're at work. So writing and communication, I think, is really key. And another one I would say that is really powerful and I think surprises introverts sometimes when I speak on this is that introverts are really great at preparing. And so, if any of you in the audience, I'd be curious to hear, are interested in public speaking or have wondered if you'd be good at it, I think that's a very hidden superpower that introverts have locked away that can really be wonderful in helping you, again, like get that visibility, get your face out there, get your voice out there, get your story out there because you are so good at preparing, because you are so good at being attuned to the audience and what they're feeling and their emotions and building those relationships. So public speaking, I think, is another sort of more hidden one that not all introverts realize, but I think it's a really great thing to try if that's something you're thinking about or have been interested in before.
Yeah, I honestly really agree with that because like
Yeah.
as someone who I am generally very extroverted, like going out in public and doing social stuff, I have a lot of fun in the moment, but generally I do have, kind of a recovery window depending on how like kind of on I've had to be that night. So I totally get where you're coming from where it's like you want to make sure that you're bringing out the best version of yourself, but not in a way that's actually draining you instead of like helping to continuously fuel you or like, recharge. So I think this
Yeah.
is where, yeah, like I very much understand where this is coming from, even though I don't experience it for these reasons. Um,
Hmm.
do you think, well, it is possible, but how do you think introverts can build meaningful professional relationships without feeling that drainingness after?
I think it really comes down to developing one-on-one relationships. I think that's also another strength of introverts. Like we connect really well one-on-one, whereas you, Meg, you might go into a big team meeting and like become friends with everyone. I think introverts can get overwhelmed by that. I know I certainly have before. And so having that one-on-one conversation, your introverts are very good listeners. Like I said before, empathetic. You really can connect on that one-on-one level. And so something that has worked really well for me, for example, when I do have to present in those big team meetings or get buy-in, it's very nerve-wracking. But being able to meet with everyone one-on-one beforehand, talk through my idea, get their feedback so that I show up to the meeting really prepared and feeling confident. That's one way where you can not only build relationships, but then leverage it when it comes time to get buy-in or share an idea with a larger crowd.
And I very much appreciate how a lot of this, things that you're suggesting are like preparation heavy kind of things, because that
Yeah,
preparation is very soothing a lot of time. I mean, myself included, like
yeah.
I feel best going into an event like, like into a social event or into something when I know that I've prepared what I need to do.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, I can absolutely understand that that would be very like not necessarily like comforting, but it's like that's part of your strength. So like let's make that more of a factor or more of a feature within this activity.
Yeah, there's no shame in preparing, like over prepare, right? Like that really helps build confidence.
Yeah. Now we do have a question from the chat here. Danielle says, as an introvert, as an introverted extrovert, I am a planner or preparer. However, I freeze when public speaking, whether a large engagement to a networking event or approaching a small group of people. This typically happens when I don't know you or I've never met you. How can I overcome this fear? I want to hear what your answer would be to this. What would you recommend for Danielle?
Okay, so let me start off with the networking event. Yeah, I've totally felt this way too, and it can feel really awkward. There are a few things I would recommend that you keep in mind when going to a networking event. So the first is that I think a lot of people at networking events feel kind of awkward, and especially post-COVID, like we're like getting used to being in person again. We're like, how do we talk to people? So just know that I think many other people are feeling that way too. It's not just you. One thing you can do before a networking event that's been really helpful for me is try to get the attendee list ahead of time and reach out to people you want to meet through LinkedIn, right? So, oh, I see you're going to be attending this event. I will be as well. Hope to meet you there. And I remember last year I did this for an event, and people started coming up to me because I guess not many people did this. And so they were like, oh, like you're from LinkedIn. I remember you messaged me. And so I had people coming to me, and that was so helpful. So you don't have to, again, like be awkward and like, oh, which group do I join? So adding people on LinkedIn, I think, is really wonderful. Smiling and just giving off positive body language when you are there, right? When we are nervous, it's easy to kind of like, oh, be in the corner or have like a
Hands
drink or
across your
food, sort of
chest.
like crossing, yep,
Yep.
crossing our arms and being closed off. So a simple smile to someone can, and finding that other one person who's by themselves, people so appreciate you coming up to them, right? If you're that person. And so being a little bit brave and sort of taking that a little extra step to do that, I think goes a long way. And then the third thing I would say is observing other people's body languages. So within each small group that you see at a networking event, look for signs like bodies slightly turned outward, right? So facing a little bit outwards, or their feet sort of facing a little bit outward. And that's going to be a person who's a little bit more open to bringing someone new into the group. So approaching that person, I think, is another strategy for networking events.
I
Um,
love it.
I'll see if you have anything to add, Meg. And then also this person asked about, Danielle asked about like large groups as well. So I can talk about
Yeah.
that
All
afterwards.
right.
Yeah.
So as a person who has run events like these networking events, right? I'm going to give
Mhm.
you your holy grail thing, okay?
Mhm.
Figure out who is running the event. It does not have to be the person in charge at all, okay? Find somebody with a name tag, or if it's like, if it's a recruitment event at, X, Y, and Z company, then find somebody that's wearing an X, Y, and Z lanyard, okay?
Yeah.
Ask that person, say, I didn't come here with anyone and I need someone to talk to. That person needs this event to go well. Okay. They want people to be talking to each other. They don't want you all wallflowered up, lined along the room and no one's saying
Yeah.
anything. So telling somebody that you need someone to talk to is golden, because it's saying, here's how you can make this event better immediately. Okay.
Mhm.
We love it. We love when you ask us for somebody to talk to, because I will find you someone, and I'm not just going to like yeet you across the ballroom and like, throw you into a crowd and hope for the best. We will find you someone to talk to. So absolutely, I very much recommend this. And
Yeah, that's a great one.
Lorraine is completely and absolutely right. Like, look for the body language kind of thing and understand that, we're all coming here for the same purpose. It's not embarrassing to be like, I don't know anybody, because we're all coming here because we want to meet more people, and it's okay.
Mhm.
All right. Now, what did you say about the large groups?
Yeah, so I think this Danielle's asking about maybe just generally speaking in front of a crowd. The first thing I would say is that nerves are a good thing, and I want to set the expectation that nerves are likely never to go away. And that's okay. Nerves are there to help us feel more alert, more focused, to be aware of our surroundings, right? So first, sort of accepting that it's okay to feel nervous, I think is the first step. Now, the thing is we don't want the nerves to overtake our body so that we forget things or that we are not performing in the best way possible. And so there's a few things that I would recommend that you can try, Danielle. So the first is 4-7-8 breathing. And that's when you breathe in for 4 seconds, you'll hold your breath for 7 seconds. So breathe in through your nose for 4, hold for 7, then breathe out slowly out of your mouth for 8. So maybe we can try it together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, okay. Everyone breathe through your nose for 4. Hold for 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And breathe out for 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let us know in the chat, let me and Meg know, like, how do you feel now? When you breathe like that, it activates your parasympathetic nervous system, and that's the part of our body that signals, oh, you're safe. You don't need to do fight, flight, or freeze, which is what happens when we get in those public speaking environments. So calming your nerves and finding things that work for you, like that breathing, is really helpful. And then I think the second thing that has worked really well for me is I'm a public speaker, as Meg mentioned, is reframing what you're there for. So I think especially with introverts, and there's something called the spotlight effect where you're like, oh my gosh, everyone's judging me. And that's also where the nerves come from. What are they thinking? Oh my gosh, I stumbled over that word. Like they're going to be remembering this forever. No, you're there to help your audience. And this is a strength of introverts, right? Again, like we connect with people, we want to be helpful, we're thoughtful about others. And so reframe it as it's not about all eyes on me judging me, but I'm here to help. And reframing that with that mindset is really helpful as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't know about other people. I honestly sometimes get I get stage fright. No one ever believes this, but it's true. I get stage fright in front of like 8 people in a conference room, whereas I
Yeah.
don't doing this. So, it just because you have never done something like this before, or you have like a fear in one area, that does not necessarily mean that that's going to translate. So, like, please don't let a fear of public speaking in like an abstract sense prevent you from trying it if you've never tried it before. Because like we said, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it early on, which can make you feel much, much, much more in control than you would if like you're called on in a meeting to give your opinion on something that you've just heard about. So,
Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, a lot of it really, I mean, again, it's the practice. Like I still get nervous. This is my career now, right? Speaking to companies and teams, but over time you learn how to control and really harness the nerves so that they become a positive thing for you.
yeah. Hema absolutely loves the breathing thing. It was very relaxing.
Hey,
Danielle feels the same. So thank you for
nice.
sharing that with us. All right, let's go to our next question here. Let's talk about kind of visibility and self-promotion. This is very difficult for introverts, especially whether you're being recognized when you don't really want to be, or you're trying to achieve something that is probably going to result in recognition, which you don't want. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. What strategies do you think introverts could use to build a personal brand that doesn't rely heavily on video or social media?
Mhm. The first thing I would say about that is that it is important for our work to be known. And Meg, you had mentioned like sometimes introverts, maybe they don't want that public recognition or they want it just like within their small team. But the reality of our workplaces are if people don't know that you're doing the work, what's it all for, right? And so you don't need to be like shouting it from the rooftops all the time, but it is important to advocate for yourself, be your own best advocate. I like to say, be the own CEO of your career and make sure that people are seeing your work and that you are building a personal brand that people know about at work. So let's target the personal brand piece first. Personal brand can feel like very marketing-y and like sort of like braggy. But really, I want you to think about a personal brand. I like to call it a career brand. And a career brand is essentially your reputation. And the thing is that we all have a brand already. Now we can take charge of our brand and be intentional about it, or we can let others define it for us. And so really you want to think about what are people saying about me when I'm not in the room, right? What words come to mind when people mention my name? And you're going to do things that ideally lead to whatever outcome it is that you want. So if you want people to see you as strategic, you need to take on perhaps certain projects at work and learn how to promote that work so that people can see that. So that's a reframe around the personal branding piece, Meg. And then the second part was around visibility. I know as introverts, it can be really hard to feel comfortable sort of putting ourselves out there. It can feel like we're bragging. So there's a few strategies that work really well. One is reframing. Anytime you share something about what you did, reframe it as a learning that can help others. Again, like introverts are so good about being in service of others. So not like, oh, my team did this and we're so great, but oh, we learned this. This worked well. This didn't work well. Here's how your team might be able to take these lessons and apply it to your own work, right? Everyone is happy to learn something that might help them. The second thing is in the words that you use. So there was this really interesting research that was published in HBR that actually showed that when you use more collaborative language, like we did this, or the team did this, or us as together, versus like I statements, I did this, I did that. When you use more collaborative statements, you're actually seen as more of a leader versus the people who use the I statements, they are actually seen as more junior. So that's good news since I think introverts are probably more inclined anyway to talk in terms of a team and more collaboratively. And then, yeah, that mental reframe again, like we need to make our work known. Otherwise, no one's going to know what we're doing. It's that analogy that like if a tree falls in a forest, but there's like no one to hear it, right? Like, did it happen or something like that?
Does it make a sound? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's those would be my pieces of advice for making sure that your work gets seen, that you're visible in a way that hopefully still feels authentic to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Mary raised a really good point in the comments saying, I'm not sure it is the recognition or reward that we don't like. Some people are morally or culturally against awards. It's the public nature of it that can be scary. There's also the gendered nature of society where women are not allowed to, get high on our britches or high on our horse. That's what it was. Yes, get up on our high horses. And I think you raise very, very, very valid points there. A lot of them, there are many reasons why people may or may not want to be recognized publicly. Sometimes it's the nature of the recognition. Giving them a thumbs up is great, but asking them to give a winning speech is not something they
Sure,
want to do.
sure,
But
yeah.
yeah, these are excellent points. Thank you all for these. Okay. When let's talk a little bit more about the like it's not bragging, okay? Because I feel like this is a piece where people kind of struggle to really know how to talk about themselves. Could you give us an example of a time where this is something that I would have had a trouble voicing, and here's how I would say it now?
Hmm. In regards to talking about like my own
Yeah, like
recognition thing.
yeah, if you're trying to point out something good about yourself, but you are not comfortable bragging until you want to figure out how to say this.
Okay. Two ideas. The first is to remember my friend Jerry always says this. What is it exactly? He says, so I think he says, if it happened, it's not bragging.
If it's not bragging, if you did
If
it.
you did the thing, it's not bragging.
Yep.
And so as much as you can ground what you're saying in like data or facts and also tie it to what the company's goals are. I mean, I can't think of any senior leader who would not want to know, like, oh, you're working on this project that's helping the company reach its goals. Tell me more, right? So
Yeah.
grounding it in data and facts, people can't argue with that. That's what happened. So that's the first thing. The second thing, something that I did that I think worked really well, actually at all the companies I've been at, but most recently at Prezi, where I led a team, is I would send out a weekly newsletter. I would post it on the company intranet. And in that, I would highlight mostly what my team was doing, and that was a really great way to socialize the work that we were doing, especially since we were a newer team. It was an editorial team, and that company had never had an editorial team before. But it was a great way to socialize what we were doing and help others within the company connect the dots, learn more about what we do. And I would have often like data scientists or engineers reach out to me and be like, oh, did you think about reaching out to this person? Or did you know we have a dashboard that might be able to help track this thing that you're working on? And so that's a really great way to, again, like build those relationships and at the same time, get visibility for what you're doing. So I think maybe in the past, I might have felt uncomfortable sharing the work, but again, like grounding it in numbers, grounding it in data, and then always linking it back to how does this help the company made me more comfortable sharing.
Yeah, I like that. I can think of a couple times in the past when I have used I have used what the team and myself have done to create like a good event or something. And
Yeah.
instead of saying like, oh my God, I hosted the best event, it was so awesome and they loved it and it was wonderful. Instead, I'll go with something more along the lines of just honestly truer to how I feel of like, these people did so much work so that I can look amazing and I could not
Yeah.
have done this without them. And so it's
Yeah.
like for me, it feels a little bit more genuine of like, yeah, I did a good job, but I did not do this in a silo alone. And they did so much that allowed me to do this. I couldn't have done this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Is that
that people are
the we us
still,
language again? Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Chriselle has a good question in the chat here. Chriselle says, if you're trying to branch into the social media space like LinkedIn, what are some suggestions on how to feel confident or battle the cringe that sometimes arises when you want to share work and accomplishments?
Yes. Yay. Okay. I'm glad someone's asking about LinkedIn. I can't remember if you said it in my intro, Meg, but I was one of the founding editors at LinkedIn, and obviously I still use it very actively, and I think it's such an amazing platform. And I'm glad, Chriselle, you're asking about social media specifically because I think actually LinkedIn is very well suited for introverts. You are writing content. It allows you to connect with people on a one-on-one level, people you might not have met before. And so I think as a networking tool, as a just like learning tool, LinkedIn is wonderful. And so there's a few things that I would suggest if you are trying to get comfortable on LinkedIn. The first thing is don't worry about posting to start. I think posting on LinkedIn can be very nerve-wracking. It can feel, yeah, just scary because it's connected to your personal identity. And so what I like to say before posting is commenting first. So finding a few people who post about topics that resonate with you and comments. Spend like 15 to 30 minutes every day commenting on, let's say, like 10 people's posts. And over time, you're going to get more comfortable finding your voice. You're going to grow your following as well. So don't just comment like, "Oh, great, I agree, sounds good," but add a little something. Add your own insights. Add your own story. Perhaps ask a question. And commenting is a really great way to sort of like ease into that LinkedIn content ecosystem. The second thing you said, you mentioned you feel maybe like a little bit awkward celebrating achievements. If you're only posting celebratory things all about you, yeah, it's going to feel a little uncomfortable and people might see it as cringe. If every now and then you're posting, I think people are going to feel happy for you, right? You have those relationships. Think about like your colleague celebrating something and you're going to be happy for them. But as you start posting more, hopefully all of you post a little bit more, you can post the achievements, let's say like 25% of the time, and use the rest of the time to talk about just your stories, your experiences, share content that you think would be helpful to others in service of others. So I like to break down the types of LinkedIn content into three categories. So you have personal, which is more like personal stories, experiences, challenges you've gone through, educational. So like 3 ways to be better on video, or I posted something yesterday, 3, I think, surprising facts about being a solopreneur. So educational. And then professional. So what's happening in your industry? Is there an article like in the Wall Street Journal that talks about something that you can comment on? So thinking about the buckets in those 3 categories might be helpful as well. I think I have so many more LinkedIn tips. Actually, let me send I think this is my link for my LinkedIn guide. It's a 40-page guide on LinkedIn, and this link I'm sharing, you get the first part for free. So feel free to check that out.
Excellent. Thank you, Lorraine.
Yeah.
All right, we're about halfway through, so we still got about 25, 27 minutes left in today's event. So if y'all have questions, please keep sending them through in the chat. I've got eyes on target there, but you can always send them through in the main chat, or you can DM them to me, whichever y'all would prefer. All right, let's go to our next question here. Sorry, y'all, instead of 2 screens, I've got my phone in this. Okay, let's move on to communication.
Okay.
I will go ahead and apologize right away. In a room full of people who are, like myself, incredibly loud and never be quiet, how can introverts make themselves heard?
I think this really boils down to a company's meeting culture. And there's so many issues. I mean, you all know and who are here today, like, gosh, meetings have a lot to be improved on in our workplaces. Too many, not well run. But there's a few things I think that introverts can do really well. So, or do to help them. So one, if you're in a meeting where everyone's super extroverted and loud, it can be helpful to find what I call an extroverted buddy. So someone who you can kind of point to and be like, "Hey, I like have something to say. Can you sort of like jump in for me or help guide the conversation so I can contribute?" That's really helpful, especially if, for example, you're a remote worker and like Meg's in person in the boardroom, right? So having Meg be like, "Oh, like Lorraine had something to say. She's virtual. Can we like turn it over to her?" Having that extroverted buddy is really helpful. The second thing I would say is to either talk to the facilitator, or when you're facilitating yourself, come up with rules of engagement. And this is really critical for meetings, let's say above like 4 people, to define how are people going to speak up? How do we want them to contribute to this meeting? So instead of everyone just speaking up when a thought comes to mind, I always like to say, please use the raise hand, the virtual raise hand feature, or contribute in the chat. And like Meg is doing as a facilitator, you also want to make sure you're calling out what you see in the chat so that those people feel like they're being heard and it's not just like disappearing into the ether. So having the rules of engagement are really key as a facilitator, or talking to the facilitator and maybe mention like, it's as an introvert, like it's kind of hard for me to jump in as quickly as others. Like, can we create more structure around this meeting so it's not the Wild West out here? So those 2 would be the immediate ones that come to mind.
Well,
And
those are good ways to
then,
frame it too, because then it's not
yeah,
just I'm not being heard in the meeting. It's you all might be missing out on other good ideas, not just mine, because
yeah,
of how, because of how we conduct these meetings or something.
sure, sure. And then what was the other one that was just on the tip of my tongue? Oh, again, as a facilitator, it's not always the best to be like, okay, like I just presented a new idea. What do you all think about this? Again, the introverts need time to process, they need time to think, and they're going to have really good ideas, maybe even better, right? But just because we can't say it right away doesn't mean they're not valuable. So incorporating things like, let's take 5 minutes to brainstorm, and then we go around the circle and share ideas. Or let's do, I don't know, let's all collaborate on this Google Doc after the fact, and then we'll come meet later. So making sure that you are providing channels and avenues for people to contribute in a way that works for introverts and extroverts, I think is also really critical. And so sometimes managers or meeting leaders, they don't even realize. So sometimes you can be that person to bring it up and share some ideas. I feel like they would appreciate that. But I'd also call out as an introvert leading a meeting, I feel like, again, like we're so thoughtful, great planners, really well suited to lead meetings. And I do believe that if you can lead a good meeting, because so many of them are bad, you can really stand out. That can be like a really big sort of differentiator and show your leadership capabilities when you can lead a good meeting.
Mhm. Well, and like I said, y'all, as someone who's pretty firmly on the extrovert side of the fence, I absolutely relish being able to use my loudness for good as opposed to just to be more loud. So like you tell me you need me to like clear some
Yeah,
space on the dance floor for you, done. Absolutely done. But
yeah,
it
amazing.
really is if you can find that buddy, it becomes a lot easier. But I also very much recommend that you communicate these things and you talk to your manager about them. Um,
Mhm.
the thing that comes to mind for me is, because little T trauma is abound for everybody, right?
Mhm.
I remember being in a class in college my senior year, and it was a very writing intensive. I was an art history major, and it was a writing intensive course. And I remember I didn't speak up a lot in class because we were talking about pretty heavy themes,
Yeah.
and it was stuff that like I couldn't really form my entire thought about a very complex idea in the moment. But I am much better when it comes to writing, especially when it comes to complex ideas like that. And I remember getting called into my professor's office, and I was heartbroken because I very much adored this woman, and she thought I had plagiarized because she was like, this is not what you sound like in class. And I had to explain to her like, it's because I need the time. I need the time to be able to like say what I'm thinking and here's what I'm
Yeah.
doing, blah, blah. But it was one of those situations of, it never would have occurred to me to try and like clarify this with her. But once she said it, I was like, oh my gosh, please, like, I can't, like, I was heartbroken. But it was one of those moments of like, no, I get where she's coming from because if I never speak up in class and then all of a sudden I'm turning in like a 5-page, very eloquent document, she has no idea where this is coming from.
Mhm.
So I very much agree with that communication method of like tell your person, like tell your manager, like, hey, I am not great like right away. I need a couple minutes to think about things, but that is how I do my work best. And so yeah, I mean, very, very useful, but also very, very much easier said than done. I'm well aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Mary absolutely agrees. Thank you, Mary, diving in there. What can okay, a lot of times when we're talking about introverted people, the conversation also of like imposter syndrome comes up, and they're not one and the same, and they're not
Right.
always, always correlated with each other. They're not mutually exclusive either.
Right.
How can introverts kind of differentiate for themselves between true introversion as well between true introversion or just feelings of like anxiety, fear, imposter syndrome?
I want to tackle the imposter syndrome piece first. With imposter syndrome, everyone experiences it at some point. And I like the reframe that if you're feeling imposter syndrome, it's a good thing. Because if we were doing a job or we were in an environment where we felt super comfortable, probably wouldn't be learning very much, right? So anytime we're putting ourselves in some new situation or surrounding ourselves with really smart people, imposter syndrome is bound to come up. And so being proud of yourself in a way that you feel that, I think, can be really helpful to not let it be sort of all consuming. Now, there is a difference, and I've certainly been someone who, there's like a happy hour that is there, or there's an opportunity to speak, and I don't take the opportunity because I am like, oh, like, you're sort of like letting your introversion take control and you're using it as like an out, like, oh, I'm just, I don't like socializing in big groups, or oh, I'm not a good presenter yet, like that's not for me. And so I think really being honest with yourself about like, is this a situation at work that is going to help my career? Am I trying to hide behind some sort of label or letting imposter syndrome take over in such a way that I'm doing a disservice to myself because like I have this cool opportunity, but I'm not taking hold of it. And so I think having just that extra second to really think about it, like, does this make sense for me to do? right? Maybe a happy hour, yeah, like skip it every now and then, right? Like you know your team, it doesn't make sense for you. You have your family at home, like you don't have to spend your time, spending extra time outside of work with your coworkers. But like if someone asks you to present or they want you to send out like an email to the team, like those kinds of things, I think you really want to assess and just observe like what you're feeling in your body and think like, is this going to help my career and am I capable of doing it? Because you most certainly are, and if someone's asking you to do it, they believe in you. So just remembering that.
Yeah, yeah, no, 110%. I very much agree with this. Jobran had commented in the chat thread here saying introverts must believe to achieve. If they can't, no goals can be reached. The quietness of introverts is not weakness, which is very common practice in industry hiring and needs improvement. Very, very true. I think it is also like really, for me, at least is what I've researched or what I've read, to me, like introversion and extroversion is more about whether you get charged up from social engagement or whether it's something you kind of have to recover from. And to me, like imposter syndrome is a little bit separate from that because introversion or extroversion for me is how I feel about the thing going into it. Whereas imposter syndrome, when I have experienced it, mostly is in the moment. It's in the like, oh my God, they're going to find out that I'm a fraud, even though a fraud at what? Like you need like there's a qualification to yap at people online. I don't know. So, but that's the thing is like for me that usually happens in the moment. And so I think if you take this advice with a grain of salt, but like I think if you think about it more in terms of how you charge or recharge, and then am I is does ever am I an actual fraud? If you think of them as two separate pieces, it's a little bit easier. I'm also a very large fan of the idea of well, if you tricked them into thinking that you're good at it, just keep doing whatever you were doing and you'll keep tricking everybody into thinking you're good at it. Like if you look at it as like I have won, it's a lot easier, y'all. It's a lot more entertaining to feel that way and to think like, oh my gosh. And also you're remembered as soon as we ended that question, your buddy who says the like it's not bragging if you did it.
Yeah.
If you're old enough, it's a Yogi Berra quote, who was a baseball player or baseball manager. And it was if it ain't bragging if you done it. But if you're younger like me, it is the inimitable Trick Daddy who coined the it ain't bragging if you got it. So just saying, y'all, these are listen to the poets of our time. Okay, Lorraine among them. All right, let's talk about overall work environment and culture. If introverts want to contribute more in meetings and kind of the decision making process on that individual level, how do you recommend that they kind of step into that?
I think so. All the tips I mentioned before around meetings are going to be helpful there. I think introverts also like post meeting. There's a lot that falls through after meetings happen. uh, Again, like just poor leadership of meetings. But introverts, I think, do a really great job of connecting the dots and tying ideas together. And so if you can be sort of that connector and that person with the strong analytical brain to bring all these points together, I think that's a really great thing to lean into with meetings. And when you do that, you see, oh, this needs to be done, or there's an opportunity here, and raising your hand to volunteer for the opportunity is really helpful. I would also add for any team leads in the audience, anytime you are proposing a project or asking people to volunteer for something, don't get the volunteers right in the moment. Again, like say, email it to me within X number of days. You want to give people time to think. You want to give people who are perhaps remote and not in the room, and they can just say, oh, well, I'll do it, right? So to equalize the playing field there.
I like that. I think that's very, very good advice. All right, we've got a little under 15 minutes left. So if you have questions or if you want to dive in deeper on any of these areas, please feel free to dive into that chat. We do have a bunch of questions I'm happy to get to, but I want to make sure that we prioritize all of you that came out here to be here with us live today. So thank you for that.
I see a question earlier, Meg, actually from Mary. Yeah. I think after the other question.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah. Mary says, I read that introversion may be a cause of self-centeredness and meism. It was an HBR article. I didn't really agree with the whole premise, but Do you think there's any truth that extroversion and introversion doesn't exist and it's more of a communication style? I don't know. I want your opinion before I say anything.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a I mean, I guess I can see where they're coming from. Like introverts are like thinking about themselves. Maybe it's more of like the spotlight effect, but I wouldn't frame it in like a negative way, like they don't care about anyone else. Because I feel like introverts actually do really care a lot
Yeah.
about other people and are really tuned into people's feelings. I don't I wouldn't also say it's a communication style because like as Megan and I were talking about, it's also like how you sort of recharge and socialize, I guess, so to speak. But definitely, like with communication styles, there are going to be different ways that introverts and extroverts are likely to communicate. But at the same time, like I can go to a networking event, and there was when was it? There was one recently that I went to, and I was like on my game. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm meeting so many people. Like I'm making conversation. I'm like giving up positive vibes, and people seem to be enjoying talking to me. And I'm still an introvert. But then afterwards, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted and I need to be by myself and no one talk to me. Right. So I guess
Which is
those qualities
okay.
exist. Yeah, which is great. It's fine. And so, I mean, I feel like that could be an introvert or an extrovert having that sort of like feeling and feeling like in your flow. So again, it's like about that recharge and maybe just like certain preferences for how we would prefer to communicate or how we would prefer to be. But it doesn't mean that you can't do, things
Yeah.
that you would see like the other side being able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm largely in the same boat. I think I think that by and large, people tend to be heavily one or heavily the other. And I think
Mhm.
where people start to get confused is they're like, but I just went to that party and I left and I felt great. And it's like, okay, well, it's not really a binary, right? And not all parties are the same, not all networking events are the same, not all meetings are the same. So for me, like you said, I have to kind of regulate and try and figure out like, okay, I have three, like if I'm hosting the virtual job fair, right? It's summit week. I'm hosting the virtual job fair. That's going to be 5 hour stint on camera. I know
Wow.
to tell my husband that like, hey, we're not talking after this is done. Like I gotta go. Like as soon as I'm done, I want to sit on the couch. I want to watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine and I love you, but I don't want to say a word. And so it is really one of those things of like, okay, it's like thinking ahead of time and kind of planning in terms of resources, basically. But there are other social situations where like I don't need that recharge, even if I go hard in the paint and I am entertaining and I am center of attentioning and all of that stuff. So for me, I think it's less about like a dichotomy or a binary of two options, and more about like what kind of social situation is that? What is it about that social situation that recharged you? Was it the people? Was it whatever? Like the fact that I don't know. There's a bunch of different aspects to it, but I think that it's a little bit more nuanced and not quite as like A or B. But I also, as I was listening to Mary's description, it kind of reminded me of how people are talking about like manipulation of what is it? Oh, it's something about how like sometimes people basically like manipulate others around them to take care of them. And manipulation sounds to me has like a real negative connotation to it, but it's not actually. So that kind of that's what reading the Mary's synopsis of that article kind of gave me, was that like, is it manipulation or is it just that I need some help and so I'm trying to get that from what I mean? Like I think it's a very nuanced discussion for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Danielle says, what do you do when you've found the icebreaker within a networking event, but the conversation goes dead after you speak about the initial topic? Do I sneak away and maybe make myself available and open to speak to the next person, or do you just stand there in silence?
Yeah. Uh, and there are thankfully strategies that you can use to help with that. So the first idea I wanted to introduce to you all is this concept called conversational threading, which I also talk more about in my book. But essentially, the idea is that you want to give people threads to pull on. And often what happens at networking events is we ask questions that require, one-word responses or just very sort of literal responses. Oh, what brought you here today? Oh, what do you do for work? Right? But when you can insert conversational threading, so let's say like Meg asks me, what are you doing? What brought you to this event? Instead of just saying like, oh, like my company sent me, I might say, oh, my company sent me, like I'm flying in from San Francisco And this is a topic that I've been like researching for a while as it pertains to, X, Y, and Z. And now Meg, instead of just saying like, oh, cool, like I'm here because of this, now she can pull on some of those threads that I've given her, and that creates more back and forth conversation. So both of us ideally are sharing threading, and we are able to pull on those different threads, and that's a surefire way to make conversations continue. So that's one strategy that I would think about. The second is that if you are ready to leave a conversation, because yes, they do sort of peter out, what you can say is, I, I, well, before I leave the conversation, or before I like give you back some time to meet some new people, I wanted to ask you really quickly one more question about that point you made about XYZ. And what that does is now Meg feels good because I'm still interested in what she has to say. And she also knows that the conversation is going to come to an end. So that's a second strategy you can use. And the third one, if you're feeling like it's time, if the conversation's petering out, that person's probably feeling it too. And they just don't know how to end the conversation as well. So saying something like, just simply like, oh, Meg, it was so nice meeting you. I'm going to go grab a drink, or I'm going to run to the restroom, or I'll leave you to it. I don't want to take up all your time. So, want to say thank you for talking, but, I'll let you go meet some others now, I think is also a perfectly fine way to leave a conversation.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like all of those. My go-to is usually, oh, I met this person. Did you get a chance to meet them yet? Because if not, you should talk to her. So like I do that one a lot.
Yeah.
The other one I have done is like you said, I need to run to the bathroom. Did you want to go I'm gonna cruise by the cheese station. Would you like to come with me, and we'll find somebody else to talk to or something. So it
Nice.
kind of gives you that option. The other thing to remember, especially with networking, is that think about it in terms of like stand-up comedy. You want to be yes anding people, not like closing the conversation. So instead of answering with like one word answers, like Lorraine said, answer with like, especially if it's a no response, answer with no and some details that can kind of help keep moving the conversation on. It kind of helps to not feel like you are shutting down the conversation without realizing it for yourself. Mary chimed in again in the chat saying, apparently in society, extroverts are winning in majorities for leadership, managerial, and promotions, which makes a ton of sense. Do introverts need to shed off their introversion to succeed in the future workplace and the hyper modern world? Where do introverts fit in? I don't think they need to, but I want to know, like, people came to hear your thoughts. So, what are your thoughts on this?
I don't think so either. And yes, it's an unfortunate truth that a lot of the extroverts do get recognized and the attention, because if there's a loud
The
person and a
loudest.
quieter person, yeah, like they're gonna draw the attention. But I know a lot of leaders, and for my book, I interviewed 3 dozen leaders, and many of them were introverts. And again, it's about understanding when you have to bring that energy, when you have to be okay public speaking, when you have to be a leader and be front facing and be comfortable with that. Because just because you're an introvert, again, like you can recharge afterwards, doesn't mean you don't know how to public speak. So I think introverts are actually really well suited to be leaders. Again, they're thoughtful about everyone, they're empathetic, and these are traits that are becoming increasingly valued and what people think of when they think of a leader. There was a study on executive presence, again in HBR, and like being able to listen well to others, being empathetic, like knowing what your team is like feeling, like those are all things that people see as executive presence now, and it wasn't the case 10 years ago. So I actually think introverts are really well suited, set up for success. And again, like, yeah, you don't have to be the loudest person. Maybe you have to speak up a little bit more in meetings and you might feel comfortable with, but then you're also going to be leading that meeting and knowing how to get more diverse opinions and voices, and like that's going to lead to better outcomes, and you're going to be a more successful leader and have a more successful team that way.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And I think, like you said, in the modern workspace, even with the advent, like if you think about it, the advent of most of how we're using AI currently, or how most people that I've talked to are using AI, is they're using it to kind of replicate a lot of the like human touch of stuff, right? The like, how do we generate the words? And so I think it is really important to remember that like introverts excel at things like that, it doesn't mean that that is no longer going to be needed. You know what I mean? If we're still communicating digitally, you still need those communication skills to be able to do that. And the writing and all the things that go along with it help to fuel that in a way that I think is massively undervalued in introverted people. And we're just because we're going to keep advancing as a society does not mean that the extroverts are going to rule everything. Truly, we can't. We should not. So I very, very much hope that many people are having these conversations with their managers of like, hey, this is how I am. Do I have to be the loudest voice in the room to be heard on your team?
And I think going back to what we talked about before, when it comes to talking about your work, you don't, again, necessarily have to be like, oh, loud, I'm speaking up in the meeting, but find the channel that works for you. Oh, if I write out my thoughts or write out some of the accomplishments instead of just voicing them in the meeting, like that's still important. You have to figure out the game that's being played, so to speak. Like you need to talk about your work, right? That's a sort of a fundamental thing that will help you advance in a workplace, but find the way to do it that works for you, that still gets the visibility and still gets the outcome.
Yeah, yeah, I like that a lot. Okay, in the last 5 minutes we've got, I want to do a couple call outs. So I'm going to send y'all some links here in the chat again. This is the link to take you to Lorraine's page on LinkedIn. There's one of those. There's also another one for how to stand out as an introvert, that course. So I definitely recommend that you check out those links there. But before we keep moving, if you have any other questions, please feel free to send them in. And yeah, about 4 more minutes, y'all. I want to make sure we adhere to everybody's timetable. Let's see. Okay, the title of this whole chat, we were talking about quiet influence. What does that look like to you, and how have you kind of wielded that throughout your career?
One of the powerful things about being an introvert is that because you are quieter, when sometimes if you're a quieter introvert, when you speak up, people listen. And I think that's an important thing to remember. You can still be influential and perhaps even more influential than the person who's just talking all the time. You don't know what's important or not. But as an introvert, because you are so thoughtful and you are careful about what you say, when you do in fact speak up, people listen. And I think when you say quiet influence, that's what immediately comes to mind for me. And so knowing that that is something that you can use to your advantage, I think can go a long way at work.
Yeah, absolutely. Mary had chimed back in saying, empathy has become controversial now, especially in tech and STEM. That empathy is what is killing the advancement of Western societies like America. Men are confident in men, a weakness moving away from diversity, even though there is a very strong monetary argument for diversity. Mary, I think you're right. There is that disconnect between what's being identified as important for young people to learn to succeed. But absolutely, like I think that is one of the things that is being hammered home a lot better than maybe it was in my day or in kind of the middle distance, is that there are multiple ways to succeed, and that advancement does not just mean up. It's advancement is a trellis, not a ladder kind of thing. So I do think there's a little bit more of that going on. So that maybe I'm blind, maybe I'm just riotously optimistic, but I do think there's a little bit more going on in the discussion there. Just fingers crossed. All right, in the last 2 minutes we have, Lorraine, what if people only remember like one thing from today's event? What do you want that one thing to be?
Oh gosh, I always forget you asked this question. I have to like whittle it down.
Sorry.
I would say that introverts, the thing I would want people to remember is that introverts can be really successful public speakers. And I think it's just such a wonderful, I know it's scary, but it's such a wonderful career accelerator. So if you can do it even when you're scared and just push past and keep practicing, it really does go a long way. And that will then translate to you being able to, create videos on LinkedIn, and then you build your brand out that way. And being an introvert can be part of your brand. It's like certainly part of my brand. So I just feel like public speaking is always such a foundational thing that can really take you far. And introverts are very well suited to the wonderful public speaker. So for any of you who are nervous or who are like on the fence, I hope you'll, even if it's a small step, speaking in front of a few members of your team, like it does not need to be like you just all of a sudden present at like an offsite or at your all hands, right? Build up to it, but I'm excited for all of you to start that journey.
All right. Okay, y'all, I want to say, Lorraine, to you, a massive thank you. This has been, wonderful as it always is. So, unsurprising there. But I am so, so happy to have gotten to spend some more time with you and help you to share your information and expertise with us. So thank you very much for being here with us today, and
Thank
for
you.
sharing your time.
Thank you everyone for coming. Add me on LinkedIn. I'll see you there.
Heck yes. All right, y'all, that's going to bring us to the end of time today. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who joined us, whether you chimed in the chat, turned on cameras, whatever. We are so, so, so happy to have had all of you with us today. Now, before we leave, I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody who contributed to today's discussion. If you have follow-up questions or anything, you can always write to us, hi@powertofly.com. We have a ton of events scheduled for the rest of January, as well as into February. So if this is your first event or your 50th, I sincerely hope it will not be the last time we see you in 2025. Go ahead, enjoy the rest of your day, week, and weekend. Go out and have the day you deserve. And I hope it won't be too long before we